Let me say this clearly. You cannot 1031 exchange your primary residence. I know this can be super confusing, but I get asked this question all the time. A 1031 exchange does not apply to your personal home. But here's where it can get interesting. There are, though, strategic ways to access your equity, get to house number 2 or 3 or 4, and potentially reduce or even eliminate capital gains altogether. So if you own a home that's seen some massive appreciation over the years and you're trying to figure out your next move, this video is for you. And hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Leslie Duvernay, California-based realtor and landlord coach, and I work with homeowners who are looking to rent out their current property, maybe house hack into their next one, and helping those tired California landlords who are looking to offload a property that's been more stressed than it's worth. If that's you, you are in the right place. And make sure that you check out all of my landlord and house hacking resources at the links in my profile. Now, I've been in the real estate and property management space for well over 10 years now. So I'm not teaching theories here. I'm active in the trenches every single day, leasing rentals, handling showings, screening tenants, negotiating deals, and having real conversations with homeowners, landlords, and tenants every single day. So what I'm sharing with you today is exactly what we do in real life. Okay, now let's break this down the right way, because the question that I keep getting over and over again is, can I do a 1031 exchange with my primary residence? The short answer is no. Long answer? Let's talk about strategy. First, let's define what a 1031 exchange actually is. A 1031 exchange, which is named after Section 1031 of the IRS code, allows you to sell an investment property and defer paying capital gains taxes by reinvesting the proceeds into another investment property of equal or greater value. Now, the key word here is investment. It's designed for properties held for business or investment purposes, not personal use. And that's why a 1031 exchange doesn't apply to a personal property. A 1031 exchange only applies to a property that is held as business or investment use, not your primary residence. So you cannot sell your personal home, buy another personal home, and call it a 1031. The IRS is looking at intent and use. But here's the good news. Your primary residence actually has a completely different tax advantage built into the tax code that most people don't fully understand, and that's the capital gain exclusion. So as of today, when I'm filming this video, if you have lived in your property for 2 out of the last 5 years, $250,000 of that gain is tax-free if you're single, and $500,000 of that gain is tax-free if you are married filing jointly. Now that's the profit on the sale, not the sale price. So if you're under that threshold, you may owe 0 capital gain. But if you're above that, that's where strategy matters. Now let's run a scenario where the gain exceeds the exemption. So let's say that you bought a house for $400,000, you sell it for $1 million. Let's conservatively assume about 8% of the sale price is all of your selling expenses. So $1 million times 8% is $80,000. $1 million minus $80,000, your net sale price now is $920,000. Now that's how you calculate your gain. You'll take the $920,000 minus the $400,000 that you originally paid for the property. So your total gain is $520,000. If you're married and you've been filing jointly, you're exempt up to that $500,000 as it stands right now. So $520,000 minus that $500,000 for the exemption, you're left with $20,000 exposed to a capital gains tax. Now, that's a very different scenario than owing taxes on, let's say, $100,000. So in this scenario, does it really make sense to try to avoid capital gains on such a small amount that will be taxable, $20,000? Now, what about if you're single in this scenario? Your total gain on the sale was $520,000 and you're exempt up to $250,000. Now, if you take that $520 minus the $250,000, you're left with $270,000 exposed to potential capital gain. Now, this is a big jump here because you were only exempt up to that $250,000. So now you've got this big number now exposed to getting taxed. So between state and federal taxes, if you're in California, somewhere around $65,000 is going to be eaten up by taxes. So this is a very different conversation. If you were married, you would owe about $5,000, let's say. But single, same scenario, about $65,000. Same property, same sale, different filing status. So as you could see, trying to find some workaround for this if you're married doesn't even make sense. Now, if you're single looking at a $65,000 tax bill, strategy might make more sense on this. Your whole goal with these strategies would be to figure out how you can access your equity without paying tax on it, buy another property, convert that other property into a rental, and still preserve your options. So the goal is really simple. You'll essentially keep control of your first property, get into house number 2, or if you're on house number 3, 4, 5, then you want to have the option to preserve the 2 out of 5 year rule for the capital gains exclusion and potentially set yourself up for a future 1031. So let's break this down so it doesn't get too confusing. Your first step would be to figure out how you can access your equity or just save strategically. So your first option would be to do a cash out refinance. You're going to refinance the entire property, including the first mortgage, pull out that equity, and remember that your loan proceeds from a cash out refinance are not considered income and they're not taxable. You can use those funds as a down payment for house number 2. This increases your leverage, but it does give you liquidity. The second option would be to privately fund this. So instead of refinancing your maybe really low interest rate first mortgage, how can you access your equity without having to refinance the whole entire thing? So you would basically borrow against your equity in the form of a second. Now that might be a home equity loan, could be a home equity line of credit. It could also be from a private money lender where they record a promissory note, but you would basically have a first and a second. Your other option is just the straight house hack, which is no refinance, no private money or second lien on the property. You simply just aggressively save for your down payment if you need one for the loan you're going to get on your next property. You would then do a lease on your departing residence for the rental income. You use that projected rental income to help you qualify for house number 2. You then move into house number 2 and you rent out house number 1. This is the cleanest of all of the methods, but it does require you to come up with the funds by just straight saving for the down payment for the next house if you need a down payment. And this is the traditional move up house hack method. Now, once you move into house number 2, house number 1 no longer becomes your primary residence. It now becomes an investment property. You rent it, you depreciate it, and you report the rental income. Now, this section is when I talk about preserving your options, remembering the 2 out of 5 rule for the capital gains exclusion. So this is critical. So if you lived in house number 1, 2 out of the last 5 years before selling, you may still qualify for that $250,000 exclusion if you're single, or up to $500,000 if you're married. So that means you can still convert your property to a rental, hold it for up to nearly 3 years after moving out, then sell within that window and still use the primary residence exclusion. You could also, with this strategy, take that primary residence that you originally had when you turn it into a rental, maybe you turn it into a short-term rental property versus a long-term rental, which gives you a little bit more flexibility on the lease terms, or maybe you go mid-term, which gives you more flexibility. So when that clock is getting close to the 2 out of 5 year exclusion mark for you to sell and avoid the capital gains, you would have more flexibility on the lease terms and the tenancy type. Now just remember, this does not eliminate capital gain. If your gain exceeds $250,000 if you're single, or $500,000 if you're married, you're still going to owe a capital gain tax on the excess. Now, if your goal is full tax deferral, not reduction, now we're talking about a different move in this strategy. So this is the full 1031 strategy. If you hold the property as a rental long enough, you then fall outside of the 2 out of 5 year rule and you treat it clearly as an investment property. Then when you sell, you can then do a 1031 exchange. But understand that at that point, you lose out on the primary residence exclusion at that point. You are now moving this property from one investment into the other, which means that the property must be held investment or business purposes and it's reported as such. Typically, at least 1 year minimum to establish the intent. Most CPAs recommend at least 1 to 2 years. There's no official IRS 1 year rule, but intent and documentation matter heavily. So here's how you make your decision. If you want to just reduce your capital gains, sell within the 2 out of 5 year window and use the exclusion. If you want to fully defer your capital gains, you're going to hold the property as a rental and then you're going to 1031 into another investment property. There are a few other investment options options when you do a 1031 exchange, but I'm going to leave those out. That would have to be a whole other video. If you then hold that property as a rental and do a 1031 exchange later on, you're now in building out a portfolio mode. Your goal would then be to convert, hold the property, leverage your appreciation, and then possibly do another 1031 later on. Now, understand the risks of using some of these strategies when you are converting properties from your primary residence into a rental. When you convert a property from a primary residence into a rental property, you trigger depreciation. Depreciation recapture does apply later on. You also take on the risks associated with being a landlord, and you can increase your leverage if you are doing the refinances. So you must have reserves. Utilizing some of these strategies isn't about avoiding taxes, it's about controlling your timing, preserving your options, and sequencing your moves correctly. So when does this make sense? Your property has really strong appreciation, the rental demand is solid, whether it be short-term, mid-term, or even long-term. You can cash flow or even break even and still utilize that property to offset your taxable income. You're looking to build a portfolio and you have adequate reserves to take this on. Now, this doesn't make sense if you hate the idea of being a landlord, the property loses money monthly, you're over leveraged, or if you need the liquidity immediately. And of course, this is not legal or tax advice. Always run this through your CPA or your appropriate tax professional for more detailed advice because everybody's situation is different. So when does it make sense to just pay the tax? Sometimes paying capital gains tax is perfectly fine. It always comes down to the math. So what is the actual tax you're going to owe? What will the equity earn elsewhere? Is holding the property even worth all of the complexity? The key is to not make emotional decisions. The way to be successful is to make strategic financial decisions. Now, when it comes to risk and reserves and all of that, if you're keeping one property and buying another one, make sure that you have reserves. Understand your debt load, understand future depreciation recapture, and make sure that you're working with a savvy CPA and lender who specialize in this type of strategy. So the bottom line is no, you cannot 1031 exchange your primary residence. Now, if you're in California and you're trying to get to house number 2, 3, maybe 4 without lighting money on fire and taxes, you can check out a lot of the free resources at the link in my profile, or you can book a strategy call with me directly. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and just a quick reminder to make sure that you are building your portfolios wisely. And as always, happy landlording!